Cool. I think we'll get started. So thanks everyone for coming. Welcome back to Furry Studies for the first session. My name is Spakes. My real name is Xavier Ho. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Design at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. I'm also one of the organizers for Furry Studies along with Jack, Sybil, who you met earlier, and Vanguard, who is online, as well as Oren and Atmos, who's helped us set up the mini art show that's around the room. So feel free to browse the sculptures, the magazines, the comic book, and the prints around here today. I also just want to remind you that we will have the Slido link that's already on the YouTube stream if you're using it online. Thank you for posting the questions. I've just temporarily archived the questions for Rob, so now it's a clean slate, but trust me, the questions has not been deleted. So for the questions for this session, please do ask them as they come up, because we will have 4 speakers to speak in concession, and then we'll do a panel group Q&A at the end. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, which is Eduardo Lactaoen. They're going to talk about furry stickers and semiotic landscapes, linguistic anthropological sketches. They're going to be dialing from online. Please give them a big round of applause.
Hello, am I allowed to start? Oh wait, hang on, I need to show my screen. Is everything working fine on your end?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Let's get started then. Okay, hello. I am very excited to be your first panelist for today, even though I am here, I am stuck in Alberta, Canada, but I am happy to be presenting with you. So yes, my presentation is on furry stickers and semiotic landscapes, linguistic anthropological sketches. Okay, so let's get started. So our roadmap for today. So first I'll do some introduction, some background on the whole project, and then I'm gonna be introducing the framework I use, linguistic and semiotic landscapes, and then applying that to the furry literature on furry convention as space. Then we're going to do a case study with a sticker sign that I took notes on at a convention. And then finally, we're going to be wrapping everything up with a nice discussion and conclusion. So let's get started. Oh, wait, no, too far. Okay, so introduction. So I am Eduardo Salinas Lactaoen, or Elias. I'm a linguistics PhD student at the University of Alberta. Although my official research is on Filipino heritage languages, my unofficial research is furry fandom linguistic anthropology. So the framework I use for this kind of research is that the furry fandom is a community of practice composed of individuals who share a set of linguistic and semiotic resources which can be deployed to construct furry identity in interaction. So the last time I talked about stickers, I used an economic anthropology framework along the lines of Moses Gift theory and its reinterpretation under new materialism. I talked about how furry sticker distribution alternated between modes of gifting and exchange, described as free exchange, to either create or not create social bonds within the community. This time we're doing something a little different. We're doing furry stickers as part of the linguistic and semiotic landscape. So what is that? So linguistic landscape is a framework that emerged in the late 90s from sociolinguistics and linguistic anthropology. Essentially, what we're looking at is the language that is available in public spaces, mostly on official signage. So as we see, road signs, billboards, street names, anything that you can see in a public space. This kind of early research was very quantitative. We would count up the number of languages and then make inferences about the ideologies of multilingualism. So for example, if there was like more English than this minority language in this certain space, then we say that, okay, English has more institutional power in society as a whole. However, as the decades went on, we wanted more attention to both the meaning of making these linguistic landscapes to the people who make these kind of signs, and also the materiality of the signs themselves. As this quote says, the colors, the green of the window shutter, the red of the wall, these things are also important in analyzing linguistic landscape. So then we turn to semiotic landscape, which expands beyond just languages to see how any public space is made subjectively meaningful through visible inscription. So a lot of this research was focused on the contestation of the public space, basically who has power to inscribe meaning into a public space. So the example I have here is of graffiti. This is a good example from the semiotic landscape literature. So graffiti artists can inscribe their own meaning into the public space by doing graffiti art. By creating public art, they are claiming the space as their own and for the public as a whole. Whereas the city also has power to inscribe their own meaning on that space by cleaning off the graffiti and making sure that only they have power to inscribe meaning onto this space. Okay. Another important concept that came out of this is semiotic assemblage. So this looks at how language specifically named languages, such as English, Chinese, Spanish, things like that, we don't consider them as existing as a system before their usage and relation to other semiotic resources within the physical environment. So as this one says, not as if languages pre-exist their instantiation in particular places, but rather the particular assemblages of objects, linguistic resources, and places that come together. So this analysis looks to see how in a certain moment, which semiotic or meaning-making resources are available for use to inscribe the space with meaning. And then the final concept that we're going to be examining are assembling artifacts. So this refers to the way that physical objects bring together or assemble and afford, that is, make available sets of semiotic resources in a certain moment. So the example we have here is a farmer's market. So we could say that this is a farmer's market space, which is constructed through the physical linguistic signs there. So the signs on the stalls. But we also have to consider both the materiality of the objects, that is the food, the produce, as well as the activity here, so selling the food. And these are all implicated in creating the farmer's market as recognizable as a space in and of itself. So as a kind of synthesis of all that literature, we have this model that I have. So assembling artifacts bring together space, activity, and language into a mutually constitutive relationship, which all give each other meaning through the assembling artifact. So how do we apply that to furry research? Okay, so I'm looking specifically here on the furry convention S space. So in at least the scholarship that I have read so far, the furry convention is typically thought of as ontologically stable a priori to any activity or research that occurs there. So for example, in Austin 2021, she believes that a convention or furry only reinforces furry identity, which she believes is socialized in the online environment. So there's the assumption that the convention is just the stage where furry identity is imported to. Similarly, we have SEM 2024, where they assert that furry conventions, like other fandom conventions, provide space. There are also spaces for certain furry cultural activities to happen. However, there's no explanation of how this convention is created as subjectively meaningful as a space for those things to happen. And then finally here, we have Roberts 2023, which says that panels are dedicated to topics that explicitly to convey to newcomers the ropes of being at a convention. So again, there's the assumption that conventions are spaces with rules that exist before any activity or socialization can occur there. Something that comes closer to the semiotic landscape literature that I've reviewed is year 2020, which looks at the furry convention as a contestable, again, conflicting, white listening space. So the white listening space or white listening subject is actually something that comes out of linguistic anthropology. It refers to the way that white ways of perceiving and categorizing language or meaning are privileged over minoritized or racialized peoples. So Europe sees the convention as a white listening space that is contested by minoritized or racialized furries, creating counter spaces within them. However, there's still no discussion of the processes of creating the white listening convention and the counter spaces within them. So I object to these kind of characterizations because space cannot just be seen as a static backdrop against which language occurs. Rather, it's the semiotic activity that creates its sites. So for example, in our case, the furry convention cannot be interpretable as such until the activities and languages that are brought into relation to it. Okay, so with all that being said, our question, how do furry stickers as an assembling artifact in the semiotic landscape construct the convention as a furry space, as a space that is subjectively meaningful as a furry convention? So our methodology. So I do ethnography, so I took field notes at 3 conventions, all with the permission of convention staff, of course. These were complemented by interviews with members of the fandom about stickers and sticker trading practices. This includes things like sticker trading and sticker bombing. And then those field notes were annotated and analyzed according to that tripartite model of assembling artifacts that I described earlier. So our case study for today will be the sticker sign at PawCon 2024. PawCon is a relatively small convention that occurs in California, just for context. So let's describe this sign. So this sign was originally placed in a sticker trading panel for people to sticker bomb, and then it was moved to the front of the lobby afterwards. Once you entered the hotel, it was kind of like the first thing you saw. I didn't know this at the time because it was already covered with things, but one of my interviewees told me that this sign was actually custom made with "Attention, please no furry stickers here," or something to that effect written on it. I originally thought that this was just like a random sign that they bought from Home Depot or something. And then eventually over the weekend, this was slowly covered with stickers of different types, both or all safe for work, suggestive, and NSFW stickers, although I will note that these latter two were in the minority. So if we consider this sign and the stickers on it as an assembling artifact affording space, activity, and language, what kind of space, activities, and languages does it afford? So first of all, space. So having the sign here and the stickers there inscribes the hallway, which is typically thought of as a liminal non-space, in that you're meant to pass through it and not give it any interpretive attention. You're not meant to ascribe meaning to it. Putting the stickers and signs here assigns this place as a furry conspace. It gains subjective meaning through its existence there. This is also important because this hotel was not only hosting the furry convention at the time, but also a grandmother's 80th birthday party at the same time. So there's kind of like a grassroots contestation of, okay, what kind of space is this then? Having the furry stickers and this sign here kind of helps claim the hotel, the whole hotel, as a furry convention space. This was evidenced in my conversations with people where they mentioned the grandmother's birthday party as not something that was just happening alongside it, but as part of the text, as part of the experience of the convention itself. So another thing that, another kind of space that this affords is what is called a convivial space. So conviviality is kind of described as the tolerance of people in a public third space. So by having the stickers here, having the sign here, it kind of creates a space for people to gather and socialize and create kind of like a community, a small community at this convention. So something else we have to mention, since I mentioned NSFW and suggestive stickers, is what is the construction of this con as what is called a porno-heterotopic space. Now, this is not a term that I love, but it is the one that is used. That is to describe a space where heteronormative erotic expectations or practices are suspended. So for context, this was a more adult-oriented con, and by having these kind of stickers out in public here, the con was constructed as a furry space where those kind of non-normative practices are allowed and even in some sense encouraged. Okay, then activity. I mentioned how instead of just being a hallway that you pass through, you can do something else in here because of the sign and the stickers here. So the activity here is changed from just passing through to stopping and admiring the stickers, pointing at them, commenting on them. You can contribute to sticker bombing, which is a ratified cultural activity among furries and graffiti in general. You can find other friends or take pictures of people. I was in cosplay while I was stopping here and taking notes on them. So people came up to me to take pictures, and I also ran into friends there because I was stopped looking at the stickers. And you can also discuss what it means to be a furry because you're looking at these stickers and you're commenting on them and putting them in relation to your own life. Okay, so I mentioned language. So what kind of language is afforded? So on one hand, we have reference to shared knowledge about certain furry cultural, in this case, erotic practices and identity. So in one vignette, two partial suitors came over, they stopped, and then they pointed to the University of California Club, Furry Club's Bad Dragon sticker, and they started laughing at it. I was on the other side of the board, and I asked, which sticker are you looking at, even though I kind of knew which one they were looking at and laughing at. It was like a non-question. And then one of the two shyly said the E6221 colored one. So there are a lot of assumptions that are being made here. So first of all, what is Bad Dragon? Second of all, how should we respond to it, in this case, as an object of affection or object of affection rather than disgust? And also, what is E621? What are the colors associated with it? So this kind of language is constructing a specific type of furry identity where those assumptions, those four things that I mentioned, are all held to be true and central to what they imagine as furry identity. We also have negotiation of furry identity with the public. So as I mentioned, some of the grandmother's birthday party was there. And so attendees of the birthday party at one point walked over to the sign and asked, so what's going on here? And then those two aforementioned suitors explained that, furries are just a group of people who really like or are interested in animals. But then one party attendee asked if having a pet made one a furry. And so the suitor had to re-explain, saying that furry is more so identifying with animality or the fantasy of being an animal and having an alternative identity. So by having these stickers here and commenting on them, there are two kinds of furry discourse, recognizable furry discourse, that are at play. So the lifestylist or hobbyist one. So the first definition they gave for furry was more a hobbyist one. So just saying that we just really like animals, which is more comprehensible and acceptable with the general public. But once that line between furry and non-furry was destabilized by the party attendee, they switched to a more lifestylist distinction, saying that it means identifying with animality or the fantasy of being an animal. So again, these are two kinds of discourses that are afforded by the stickers and this sign being here. Also points to these kind of discourses not being so much as set furry identities, but more so resources for constructing furry identity within a certain context. Okay, so discussion. So contestation of the con space. I mentioned that contestation was a big part of semiotic assemblage. So on the one hand, we have non-furry spatialization, that is the creation of subjective meaning of the space, and then furry spatialization. So generally in the public space, the middle-class bourgeois ideology is to have a clean public space. This is what is required, and governments, usually municipal governments, go along with this by cleaning public spaces and then using standardized signage to index their institutional power. However, on the other hand, through practices like sticker bombing, furries are able to construct a landscape as a subjectively furry space by putting stickers there and then claiming that space in a sense as their own. In addition, some people do put NSFW stickers in public spaces, and this, in a sense, challenges the assumed heteronormativity and non-eroticism of the public space as well. So there is that. There are those two kind of contestation of the con space. However, we also have to nuance the furry spatialization point, because we also have contestation between the furry institution and the furry milieu, so the general public. So furry institutions need to control sticker bombing to avoid excess fees, because if you put stickers on public or hotel property, they will get a big fine and may not be able to keep financially supporting their convention. So by putting official places where you're supposed to put stickers, they're able to control the meaning of this space. They also need to control the level of permissible NSFW content in a con public, because cons also have the issue of catering to a wide variety of furry demographics. On the other hand, we have the furry milieu. In a lot of my interviews, my interviewees said that even though there are official places for them to put their stickers, kind of the fun of putting stickers on places is that they're not allowed to be there. So they said even if the cons have official places to put them, they will go out and put the stickers wherever they want. However, there were also debates in my interviews over responsibility to manage the fandom's reputation. Like, a lot of them were like, I don't know if we should put these stickers on public property because then our con might not exist next year, or we shouldn't put NSFW stickers in public spaces because that's what the public already sees us as, and we don't want to reinforce that image. So within the con space themselves, within the furry community, there is also contestation, there is also debates over what kind of spaces we should be constructing with stickers. So our conclusion, so I said stickers are an assembling artifact. So what kind of things do they assemble? So they assemble space, activity, and language into a meaningfully mutually constitutive whole. So in this case, we saw how the furry convention as a space, furry convention activities, and the language of the furry convention were all connected and made connected by these stickers. Okay, so that is all my presentation. Thank you so much. I hope I did not go over time for that. Oh, almost over time.
Great, that was super interesting. All right, so our second speaker is Junos, who is also coming from online. They're going to tell us about furry music, an analysis of composers, producers, and convention performances. Please give them a big round of applause.
Hi, I'm João Araújo, or John, or in the fandom Junos. I've been a furry for more than half my life, which is starting to give some feelings. And while I spend most of my time doing music and sound for games, I also do research. Today I'll be talking about furry music and sort of raising questions about how to define it. So, furry music is typically seen as less important part of the fandom. In 2026, furries gave it a middle-of-the-range importance, lower than art, community, conventions, internet groups, or acceptance. Its more abstract nature makes it harder to fit into a community that revolves around anthropomorphic animals. Sorry, Rod. While you can depict that clearly in a visual medium, it becomes harder to do so musically. So the fandom has debated what furry music even is. I have noticed 4 ways that music is or can be categorized as furry, split into definitions with the fandom as a deciding agent and without that. Furries themselves can define this music as belonging to the fandom, as it being created by furries in the context of the community, and or regarded as furry by the fandom. Or anyone can define music as furry if it's made for furries, akin to a commercial label, or music that has furry themes, from talking directly about the fandom to just having non-human animal noises. I would like to preface this by saying that we are not going to find one definition that fits every single case. Through anyone's experience with what they could consider furry music, they will find themselves defining this term in various ways with respect to the context in which it occurs. In the end, these terms serve a purpose to ease understanding of a specific phenomenon, to communicate ideas. So, in this way, the best definition for your context tends to be the one that most easily allows you to communicate your ideas. First, we would have some trouble if trying to find a purely musical definition for what furry sounds like. All kinds of music have been called furry, but there are some tendencies. For example, just in Bandcamp, furries publish a lot more electronic and experimental music than in general. Of course, there's conventions that often include dance parties, and those often play electronic music. In fact, MFF dance parties are allocated roughly double the time reserved for other types of music performances. So the most common, I think, view of furry music is as a scene, as specific to the fandom, made by members of the fandom. The music is furry if furries make it. There are advantages to this definition, to the sense of community of the fandom, the rejection of the mainstream, the keep furry weird sentiment, maintaining authenticity of furry as community first and aesthetics later. The act itself of using this definition is oftentimes performative, as in one does it as a way to protect the perceived ideal or authentic identity of the fandom. In fact, when FWA invites musicians from outside the fandom, they are met with a lot of criticism. This seems to be more applied in the case of music than in other arts. Still, many classify Disney's Robin Hood as a furry music, nine old men in or out, regardless. In fact, the fandom is often described as a community of fans of anthropomorphic animals. Is the Lion Man sculpture made during the Ice Age furry art? Does a sports mascot become a fursuit if a member of the fandom puts it on? Or is it a fursuit if built by a furry, even if never worn by a furry or during furry contexts like conventions? Through a visual medium, the definitions of furry have an easier time including works made by people who may not even know what a furry is, as the depiction of the anthro animal is more central. In music, a more abstract art, things get blurrier. As an artistic expression, not just of the individual creator, but of the community, furry music, like Riot Girl, Straight Edge, and Narco-Punk, includes political and philosophical elements of the fandom. Like Ian Martin said last year, furry music videos often have this for us by us structure, as echoing important aspects of the fandom, such as queerness and acceptance. Perhaps we should consider having furry music being what is defined by furries, but not necessarily made by furries. This keeps the agency and the control of this definition inside the fandom, but it also allows for the inclusion of outside music that may have particular furry association. There are, in fact, a lot of playlists by furries with titles like Furry Music, Furries Forever, Furry Playlist, that include a lot of music not made by furries. You can find fandom members sitting next to Imagine Dragons, Coldplay, or Maroon 5. Outside of furry musicians, animal themes seem to be common in these playlists. But are we just pushing the question further ahead? Like, if furry music is whatever furries label it as such, we still have to answer why are furries calling this or that furry? Maybe it's if it's made for furries. Here we could say that the convention performances are furry since they take place in a furry context, even if the performers are not part of the fandom. Besides that, there's all the parody songs about the fandom, covers with furry-fied lyrics, and many music videos with furry characters, VR, chat personas, fursuits, animated anthro animals, soundtracks of furry movies and games. The context in which the music is consumed can be a part of this definition. And this relates as well to commercial labeling of music. Beyond musical characteristics, companies create genres for almost the sole purpose of facilitating commerce. We can't forget this aspect of the fandom, a group which a whole economy surrounding commissions of visual drawings of our personas. In fact, I saw earlier in the Telegram group people talking about furry as a parallel economy. Finally, like how furry visual art can be whatever has anthro, non-human animals, music could be furry by referencing that. This can include songs about humans acting in animalistic ways, being compared to animals, wanting to be an animal, wanting to be a cartoon, or just music that includes animal noises. Or themes of the fandom itself, like a pause and effects song that's all fandom references, references that furries, only furries would understand. So again, this by us, for us element of furry music. Or like Pent Up Pup's latest release, talking about common fandom kinks and experiences, including a teaser music video where the lyrics are part of a Telegram chat, including the stickers. The digital kind, Eduardo's already spoken of the physical stickers. Again, as is often the case, the best definition tends to be the one that is most useful for the person and the context where it's used. So a working definition. Words are only as good as how much they help us communicate. While this semantic fuzziness, pun intended, is more obvious in the case of music, the debate of what constitutes furry is and will be ongoing even in areas like visual art of anthropomorphic animals. The fandom is alive and growing. We aren't yet a fossil for historians to arrive at some consensus. Broad and narrow categorizations can coexist, even if this coexistence is marked by friction. Fandom is born out of a balance between fascination and frustration. It's aliveness, bringing with it a lack of systemization that has led to multiple definitions, meanings, and contradictions, that brings the frustration. But if this fandom wasn't as fascinating as it is, furry music wouldn't be a concept. Thank you.
Super interesting. So we had stickers, we had music, and now I'm going to introduce the third speaker who is also online. Now, I first met Reuben Mount or Vanguard in last year's Furry Studies, and he was also helping organizing and starting the whole thing. And he's in the final year of finishing his PhD, so highly regarded there. He's going to tell us about Enter the Anthropomorphocene, furry video games as a lens to examine human and non-human experience in the post-Anthropocene. Please give him a huge round of applause.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, as Spakes very nicely said, my name is Vanguard or Reuben Mount. I'm a final year PhD student at Birmingham City University in the UK. My research my research is looking at the furry fandom as a safe space to explore identity. That's my thesis. But also I have a very huge interest in video game cultures, so I try and make that furry whenever possible, which is what this is a end result of. So as the kind of first thing, I'm just going to introduce the terms just because it will make it easier to discuss later. So what is the Anthropocene or the post-Anthropocene? The Anthropocene is a term that's fairly recent, generally around about 2016, 2017, and it outlines essentially that the era we're currently in is the Anthropocene. It's an era in which humanity has the primary influence over geological, cultural, and just the world in general. So that's loosely described as it's human activity having a dominating presence on multiple aspects of the natural world, as said by Malley in 2017. So that's the Anthropocene. So the post-Anthropocene logically means that happens after that. So that's looking at fictions or looking at kind of narratives and looking at circumstances in which humanity has passed. That kind of dominating presence has moved on. So the post-Anthropocene is a world in which human beings are no longer central in the functioning of planet Earth or are perhaps entirely extinguished, as Ruffino said in 2020. So that's the Anthropocene and post-Anthropocene. One thing I do want to, although I think we're all going to already know what this means, what is post-apocalyptic fiction? Because that is kind of important for looking at the post-anthropocentric fictions. It's essentially what happens after the apocalypse. But generally speaking, it's a bit more than that, because post-apocalyptic fiction tends to engage with the present, translating it into the future to examine the present, and also treats the future as a more ambiguous future in which things have not been decided, things have not yet come to fruition yet. So, as Petetti said in 2017, post-apocalyptic narratives push back the traditional mode of futurist speculation, opening up spaces of ambiguity in apocalypse's seamless accounts of straightforward transition from present to future. So it's pushing back against that idea that basically time is ever marching forward and making it a little bit more ambiguous in the kind of interim. So what does that mean for video games in the post-apocalypse? So I've got like several examples here. So I've got Fallout 3 from Bethesda in 2008. Top right is Horizon Zero Dawn from Guerrilla Games, which is 2017. And bottom right is The Last of Us from 2013 and Naughty Dog. So all of these are set in the post-apocalypse. And all of these are essentially post-anthropocentric texts. So for example, to use Horizon as an example, the robotic dinosaurs, they're the ones that are causing ecological and kind of natural change in the world. They are the dominating force. So all of these texts are in the post-Anthropocene. So as I said earlier, they also fit within the post-apocalypse simply because the current environmental and social problems are being metaphorically projected into the future. So ideas about climate change, for instance, are very, very prominent in games like Horizon Zero Dawn. Things like nuclear warfare are very, very prominent in Fallout 3. So these ideas that there are current problems that are projected into the future using this kind of lack of human influence to examine the current human condition. But enough about that. Let's get on to the furry. So people may be familiar with the Little Tail Bronx series from CyberConnect 2, which has been running from 1998 to present, beginning with Tail Concerto in 1998 as pictured there. And I wanted to very quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it is kind of important that I do cover this, a very quick history of the narrative of the Little Tail Bronx, which is a lot darker than the really, really cartoonish image would give. So in terms of the order of events, so firstly, and this is all set on Earth, by the way, an unidentifiable technology called Juno was uncovered. That's the first kind of starting point of and this is in the future of current Earth. Then World War III broke out because humanity can't help themselves, and they were fighting over Juno, and that resulted in wiping out humanity entirely in the 21st century. During that warfare, chunks of the planet were hurled into the sky, becoming sky islands, and all living beings, everything was completely eliminated, and the data was stored in the Juno. And then later, non-human races, the Felaneco and the Canino, it's not hard to tell what animal species they will be, were created by one of the Juno, and then they became they inhabited this new world. So that's a very, very brief history of Little Hotel Bronx, which brings us on to the main game that I want to focus on, which is Fuga Melodies of Steel from 2017. So in Fuga Melodies of Steel, this is the earliest point in the narrative of Little Hotel Bronx, set 2,000 years after the reset. So in other words, when living beings were completely wiped out and added to the Juno, and 700 years before the first game in the series, Tel Concerto. It begins with the invasion of the free islands of Gasco, which are an archipelago of sky islands by the Burman Empire. And the narrative follows a group of Canino and Felaneco children in a kind of very, very close to World War II analogy. And it follows the resurrection of gigantic war machines that were from before the reset, so from the World War III period. So that's roughly a kind of overview of the narrative of Fuga Melodies of Steel. But how does this fit into the post-Anthropocene? So there are several things in which this fits in, realistically. So firstly, it has an ambiguous futurism. Because it has multiple endings, because it has multiple kind of path lines you can take, the narrative itself is completely ambiguous. You aren't necessarily heading towards a particular kind of end to this particular warfare or this particular kind of encounter you have. And it's that kind of ambiguity that kind of lends itself to being part of this genre. Humanity's extinguished, they're gone. This is definitely post-Anthropocene, if we go back to Rufino's quote earlier, simply because humanity's influence has diminished because they're not there anymore. Humanity's gone. So that humanity being extinguished, post-Anthropocene, perfect. There have been significant changes to the ecological and cultural norms of the world caused by the war, the Sky Islands, etc. And obviously by the fact that now instead of humans, you've got a canine and feline race that are the races on the planet. That brings different dietary and different kind of requirements in terms of what they would need and how they would live. So therefore, there have been significant changes. Therefore, once again, post-Anthropocene. And also, it's a post-apocalyptic narrative because it is based on kind of modern concerns, modern problems, the increases in technology, warfare, etc. So it's once again, these fears are being projected into the future, as we saw earlier with the description of what post-apocalypse is. But my problem is that I don't think the post-Anthropocene is the way to go about this. And it's really for one reason, and you've probably noticed what that is already. It's just too human. It's not focusing at all on the non-human. It's basically, I mean, it's the clues in the word, Anthropocene. It's focusing on the fact that, oh, boo-hoo, humanity's not here anymore. And that's what's kind of led me to think about that in a little bit more in depth and kind of explore what would be beyond that. And why, but more importantly, why does it matter? Why does it matter that the focus on the human, that this focus on the human is kind of undue? Why does that matter? The first thing is that post-apocalyptic and post-Anthropocene narratives, they foreground the human and how they're overcoming the challenges of this post-apocalyptic world. You see it in The Last of Us, you see it in Horizon Zero Dawn. It's focusing on the human. The human is the main draw there. And that kind of misses the experiences of the non-human. So I've got a good quote here from Baisha, who looks at The Walking Dead primarily, that zombies, mutants, and other technocultural monstrosities often raise specters of a Frankenstein-ish nightmare where a new species takes over human worlds in post-apocalyptic imaginaries. So that's foregrounding the non-human as an antagonist to the human. And I have a problem with that because if we look at furry video games, which we have been already, the non-human isn't the antagonist; they are the protagonist. So this focus on the absence of humanity rather than the presence of a non-human misses the trick and it misses the point. So that's why I have termed the Anthropomorphocene, which is a mouthful, as the fact I just stumbled over it, which shifts that focus. It changes that focus. So rather than it being after the era of human influence, it's now this is the era of non-human or anthropomorphic influence. Rather than it's no longer then, it is now these. And that shift in focus, as when I return to Fuga in a second, it's important. It really kind of reframes looking at this media text. It acknowledges the human experience of the text, but it doesn't rely on anthrocentrism. So the problem with post-apocalyptic fiction in general is that the post-Anthropocene is spectral. The vision of humanity without humanity, it can only be discussed. It can't be lived, which is what Yang said in 2024. Like we can't envisage a life without humanity because we are humanity. So if we weren't here, we wouldn't be there to envisage it. So the point of the Anthropomorphocene, it allows us to examine these anthropomorphic texts with the human influence there, but acknowledging the fact that it's not humans that are influencing this new world. And then because of that, and video games are especially good for this, it creates a space to use this distance between us and the non-human, but that being aesthetic difference. So for instance, tail and ears, or even mechanical difference. So animal characters behaving and being controlled differently because they have particular animalistic traits. It allows us to examine and challenge or even subvert humanity through these new lens, and examine humanity in a similar way to post-apocalyptic flinging things into the future, but looking at the human through the lens of the non-human and how they interact and how they interplay with one another, and what kind of humanistic traits end up carrying across. So returning back to Fuga Melodies of Steel then, Pequenino and Filaneko have replaced humanity. That is a fact. And returning to Baisha's statement, they're not the antagonists here. They're not like the zombies or the mutants in Fallout. They have replaced humanity fully. They are the new humanity, essentially. And that means they should be the focus. It shouldn't be that humanity aren't here. It should be that these are the main focus. Nature and animals are thriving. There's a good quote basically that I'll condense down from Nystrom in 2021 that states that nature and kind of like the greenery and being able to see characters repose in verdant kind of green areas next to fresh water, it creates a stark contrast to the ruined world that the post-apocalypse is set in, but it also simultaneously creates hope that even though things are destroyed, things can thrive. And Fuga is set in a world where nature has thrived. It's been a complete reset, and only the kind of return of past machines of humanity are what end up plunging the world into chaos. The elements of the human linger, but the non-human has been critical to survival as well. The impact of the humanity, as I already said, on Fuga's world the war machines returning, and also the fact that they do end up going to war again, just like humans do, is reflective and is a way of examining humanity. But it's not, but the animalistic nature of these two races has meant that the world has changed to accommodate for these people to live there. And also because these are the two races that survived the entire world being wiped out, their existence has been critical, and their particular creation has been critical to life existing at all. And then finally, it defies humanist structures. The key thing and the key noticeable thing about Fuga is that there is no currency, really. It's all to do with trading. You trade such and such for food. You trade that for, well, you can trade food for ammunition, for instance, for your tank. But it's all to do with trade. There's not currency. So the capitalist system of humans has collapsed entirely in the Anthropomorphocene. And that is important because that humanist structure is gone. So that's kind of re-examining Fuga through that lens. But how does that affect furry video games? And I'm almost finished. So all furry video games can be looked at through this lens, especially the ones that have absence of humans entirely, because although the quote here from me, although the human influence on the characters and world building from humanity is still apparent, because these are anthropomorphized animal characters, and some of their behaviors kind of reflect humanity, etc. This specific shift to analyzing furry video games and furry media as being Anthropomorphocene foregrounds instead the exploration of the non-human experience in these worlds, instead of focusing on the humanist experience. And that allows us to then re-examine ourselves as well. Because if you look at these worlds, Fuga is a key example, only the human, what you could class as the human aspects of behavior and experience are what bring pain and suffering and unhappiness in these worlds. And that's a sobering thought. And this can, as I said, be used for basically any furry text, simply because it is the non-human, and they are the ones who influence the world at this point. And realistically, that's as far as I've got with this thinking at the moment. But happy to talk to anyone about this. But yeah, there's my references, and thank you all, and I'll see you next time.
I would like to invite the final speaker for the session to come up, Ian Apollo Gray. Can't see. Ian's going to tell us about an anthology without an editor, the impact of funny animals, bracket 1972, on the furry art market and its valuation.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. While we're getting all of the tech stuff squared away,
Sir.
I can't surprise you with my media bits. All right, hold on. Let me turn this screen towards me. All right, so here are my quick little contextual things before we get going while I'm waiting for my screen to emerge. Number one, I'm going to be talking about status transfer, and just as a bit of context, when I say a high status furry, that does not mean a popufur. Status transfer examples that I'll be giving are from outside economics. I have made this a math-free economics discussion, yay! And when I say terms like fine art, mass market art, and furry art, these are just the terms of art, if you will. They do not convey any meaning other than to describe particular categories of things. I know the term fine art and the fine art market is conveys a degree of authority that we might not necessarily want to be there. And just as a nod to Rod's opening conversation with us today, which was really excellent. Part of the reason why I'm excited to have this talk with you today is that we have, in fact, grown quite a bit as a community with a degree of like power and authority over our own creation and our own work, and that means that we have an economy. We have a market, and it is exploding. Just as an example, I don't know if anybody else felt personally victimized by this. I'm from the East Coast. I live in New York, but the rooms for Furry Week in Atlanta went on sale during the last presenter's talk. The 3 primary con hotels sold out in 3 minutes, and the other 5 con hotels sold out in 5 minutes. So this is really impressive, but I want you to think about how much fucking money that, how much friggin' money that was that, that moved. And also, if anybody has an extra bed space, thank you. All right, so, oh, sorry, am I too close to it? Oh, my bad. All right, cool. I also know we're running late, so I'll try to be quick, and I'm going to skip through some stuff. So yes, this is a presentation about economics, and is this the right button? There we go.
Sir, what is your opinion on the socioeconomic state of the U.S.?
Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. The furry marketplace and the furry art marketplace is really fascinating in that as a community, furries have created a different way of engaging with capital than one would otherwise expect from general market wisdom. I was going to tell a story here about the sharing of resources, but I'll paraphrase this a little bit to say that as a community which is highly dimorphic, we tend to also be dimorphic in access to status and authority. We tend to be incredibly altruistic and generous with one another, far beyond what one would expect amongst other marginalized, connected communities and their resource sharing. Part of why this is so interesting is that in terms of the way in which we transfer status to one another, we don't generally have consecrators. We don't generally have outside institutions that confer status. And I'll explain a little bit about what I mean when I say status in this sense. The larger project that I'm working on right now is trying to understand why the furry fandom flouts so many conventions around the way in which our norms and our behaviors operate in our structure of capital. And I return oftentimes to these 4 distinguished thinkers in these lovely black and white photos as Pierre Bourdieu, Michel Foucault, Richard Thaler, and Hortense Spiller. I won't be talking as much about Thaler and Spillers. They're on the micro side of this, but Bourdieu and Foucault will come up quite a bit. My ethnographic findings have found that through the act of furrying, we create counter-normative identifications and restructure habitus for identity democratization and counter-public methods of capitalism. This is a really fruitful thing for not just us to understand amongst the furry community itself, but actually provides insights into ways to create more equitable markets broadly outside of the furry fandom. So hi, I'm Apollo. I am so sorry that I could not fly here with my suit because I would have loved to give this lecture in suit. These are all my bona fides. I'm an economic sociologist, product ethnographer, and performance study theorist in the process of finishing up a master's degree at the NYU Tisch School of the Performing Arts. And I'm everybody's second favorite deer in the room, or third favorite deer. Hi, Addie. This is what this project looks like. It's kind of chaotic. I would love to read it to you, but I don't have time. All right, so furry commerce is really quite remarkable in that it has so many structural similarities to other marketplaces. We'll be comparing it to the fine arts market in this talk. But while we think it behaves similarly, it does a lot of things which are really surprising. And this seems to be a product of furry as an operant force. Rod talked about furry versus furry fan, and now I'm going to talk about furry in the same way that Jose Esteban Munoz talks about the idea of queer, furry as an activity, one furries something. And yes, this is an economics presentation, but there is no math. Validate me more, please. So the easiest analogy for the furry art market is, in fact, that the furry art market is a luxury goods market. How many of the people in this room right now are wearing or have on them some piece of furry-affiliated art or merchandise that they did not make with their own hands? That's a lot of hands up. I should be raising my hand too. So this is why this is so interesting, right? If I were to describe the furry marketplace and its participants as diverse, that would say that there's a wide number of things, right? There are many different types, but what we actually see is a high degree of antipodes, right? A high degree of income variation between furries who are very wealthy and furries who are in a lower socioeconomic status. Same thing with educational attainment, right? And as we demonstrated by all of us having lots of furry things that we wear, part of the ways in which we demonstrate status, which I will define, I promise, is through the consumption and display of objects. And all of this would suggest, in accordance to a handful of other things, that the furry marketplace would be incredibly unstable, but it is stable, and there is a very low barrier to entry into entering into furry commerce. In other words, there's something about furry that creates a meaningfully different outcomes to what current theory, economic and economic sociological theory, and behavioral economic theory would otherwise suggest. To paraphrase one of my favorite sociologists, when furries do things, they do them in a furry way. This is based off of William H. White's "People tend to sit where there are places to sit." I'll ask one more question before I move on to the next slide, which is, please raise your hand if being a furry in some way contributes to your livelihood. Yeah, that's a pretty high number of folks. I should raise my hand too. I'm a furry researcher. So we can think about this in a micro or macro level. From the micro level, looking at how identity moves up and shapes the market, and from a macro level, looking down at how habitus shapes furry marketplaces. Mostly we're going to be looking at the macro, but that gigantic rat's nest of a project goes over a lot of the different things. And so today, I'm going to talk about status sharing and some of the structure in the furry art market and how that plays out. So one very specific form of status transfer. So this is a booth at Art Basel Miami Beach. That is a Jaume Plensa sculpture in the middle that sells for somewhere in the mid 6 figures range. But there's not very much different. This is also a booth that I worked in. There's not very much difference between this booth here and this booth here. That's my buddy Garnetto. I saw somebody wearing a cherry box bag. Shout out to you, wherever you are. All right. And this here, right? Art fairs in the fine arts world and dealer stands operate in incredibly similar ways. And that means that we can think about these commercial marketplaces, at least within the sense of the fair, as being quite similar. But actually, it extends beyond that. These are the sites for comparison. This is the 2025 version. Sorry, I'm not showing you the original. We can compare things like stakeholders and participants. That would be your artists and your consumers. Objects of exchange, right? Operations of exchange and norms of exchange. Okay, I'll show you the original one. And I want to draw your attention to the bottom row. I'm here for the art. I'm here for the porn. I'm here for the porn too. And I'm here to sell these guys porn. So we have our first group, the participants in the marketplace. There are quite a few similarities, but once again, we have a handful of differences. I would argue that galleries as intermediary forces aren't actually that big of a factor in the operations of the market. We have our objects of exchange, which, anybody want to guess what they are? It's art! Sorry, I just yelled. I'm sorry for everyone online. I just yelled into the mic. Structures of exchange. This would be fairs, art shows, and then B2C sales. That would be you commissioning something or buying something from somebody's website. Once again, intermediaries are a major difference. And then we have our methods of exchange. Ooh, what does that mean? It's capitalism, baby. You like my... That's Nikita Khrushchev from when he banged his shoe on the table. But as a deer, right? And so market structures are our norms, and the number one thing I'd love to talk about right now, but I won't be able to, is disinterestedness versus interestedness. But we're going to talk about stable versus unstable transfers, status transfers. Boom. Okay. In summary, there are meaningful similarities between the fine arts market, which is a luxury goods market, which is an understandable commercial market, and the furry art market, and yet some things in their operations behave differently. Cool. All right, let's talk about status transfer. Status, once again, high status does not mean popular. I don't know if you recognize either of the people in these images. One of them is Kai Dirdwolf, and the other one is Skuro. Skuro is going to be the guest of honor at Midwest Fur Fest this year. And Kai is a very well-known individual. Here we see what appears to be two people of high status within the community interacting with one another, but it is in fact somebody of high status and somebody of low status. I am in that fursuit. I'm borrowing it from my friend. So here's something to think about in sort of a broader, fascinating sociological level, what in fact is happening in this picture. So what is status? I stuck up my favorite meme because status is when you have your dear ethnostate. So status beliefs are associated with worthiness and competence, the things that count in recognizing societal differences. If this sounds like I'm trying to describe what Bourdieu is talking about as one moves through a field theory, that's what I'm trying to do. Status is not a proxy for quality. It is not a proxy for fame. It is rather a way in which one gains power and authority within a particular field. Status hierarchies are the variance in status that one might have, and this nasty mess of squares is from Pierre Bourdieu's discussion of the different fields of cultural production, of, oh God, what was the big one? Class relations, thank you. And you can see a little bit in this, I'll have the slide show up on my website, the ways in which one might move through different status levels. Status and association. Generally, it tends to be the case that high status actors want to associate with other high status actors. This is from a paper by Joel Podolny looking at tombstone advertisements for security sales. If you look at the top banks, you see Salomon Brothers and Merrill Lynch Capital, right? These are the two banks at the top. Those are particularly high status actors. And as you move down the list to Tucker, Anthony, and R.L. Day, who I have no idea who they are, right? But like, I recognize Goldman and Sachs, I recognize Morgan Stanley. You can see that status groups are linked together one after the other. What was so interesting about Podolny's work was that he discovered that firms were not rational actors in terms of trying to make the most capital in their behavior. They, in fact, would back out of otherwise profitable agreements if they did not feel as though they were associated with the proper status in advertisements. So capitalists are petty no matter where you go. There's something called the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect is the good get better, right, and the poor get poorer. People who are of high status and high repute tend to receive more recognition. This is the very famous stairs. Those stairs, I tried to find a picture of just the stairs, and I couldn't find one of just the stairs, just people on the stairs, right? And so the stairs in some way are a status conferring object, right? To have a photo on the stairs is something meaningful, and this is the DJ Nonstop Pup, who is also quite well known. One would say that I think he has quite a bit of power and authority within the field of cultural production within the furry fandom, right? In trend setting, in musical representation, and here he is in this particular status conferring stair set. What is interesting about the furry fandom is that I can take you to another image of these stairs on an eBay listing also that image is all garbled. I don't know who that is, but the image has been like garbled so that somebody can sell a knockoff fursuit. And that this image is so prominent in eBay listings for like mass manufactured fursuits doesn't seem to diminish the status conference that comes from these stairs. And that, in fact, is a rather surprising result. I'm getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to try to move quickly so that we can answer some questions. So our expectation is something called recursive and balanced status transfer. A high status actor and a low status actor interact. The low status actor gains some, and the high status actor loses about the same amount. Consecration, right, the operation where certain objects and persons are identified as deserving admiration over others, right? The consecration of status can also come from validation outside of individual actions, i.e. the stairs, right? So this status-based evaluation in the marketplace tells us that we think that high status actors should primarily associate with another high status actors, and they should avoid associating with low status actors, and that consecration should be a force in achieving status. Well, it turns out that that's really not the case within the furry fandom. There are very few institutional validators and consecrators of status interaction, and high status and low status actors tend to interact quite frequently. When one walks into the dealer's den at a furry convention, you will see prominent and well-known artists next to new artists. Within an artist alley, you might see somebody who had been vending in the main dealer's den at another convention. This intermixing between high status and low status means that the network of professionals within the furry fandom and within the furry fine arts market have a high degree of network density, and that they can share and uplift one another. And yet we still see things like status hierarchies and the Matthew effect being viable options. However, this might be changing. This is an image of the Bunker Projects, which held a yeah. Let's give a round of applause to Room Party. This is a really friggin' cool show that happened in Pittsburgh in the lead up to Anthrocon, and I believe ended right as Anthrocon was ending. This is an event that was curated to present furry art outside of the convention space. And because this event is curated, right, and then presented to an outside audience, it gives the option for the consecration of status within the furry art market. And that's kind of what Funny Animals was doing. Funny Animals was an anthology edited by R. Crumb and brings together important anthropomorphic animal comics from the 1970s. We see the first iteration of Mouse in this, right? By bringing together a collection of these artists, consecrating them in a volume, right, and allowing the association and statuses of these artists to mix, we have something here that is a representative and valuable part of history. So this is important for us to consider because so many members of our community, right, are financially dependent on the furry art market. And here's a picture of me simping really hard for T-Bone from SWAT Cats. So this is important because right now we're seeing massive growth in the furry art market. We have seen an explosive number of people participate in terms of engaging in spending capital, and what that means for the people who are financially dependent or financially invested in the furry fandom is that eventually this bubble will come to an end. Now, the subtitle of this was boom, burst, or stabilize. I don't have time to go into predictions, although if you ask me about them, I will share. But in understanding the way in which our market exists, we can better protect the furry artists that we care about. We can create opportunities to move outside of our own networks into both mass market art or into the fine art market world, and work to create greater stability within the marketplace. And so in understanding that and sharing that little bit with you, feel free to sign up for my website so that you can read more of my things. I don't have a Substack, maybe I should. And thank you so much for listening, guys. You're awesome. Here are my citations.
Okay, so if anyone have any questions, I just want to remind you, it would be good to have questions for each of the speakers while we have time. But if anyone have any questions in person, feel free to go up to the microphone. And if anyone online, feel free to put it through Slido. Please.
Hey, man, thank you so much. You touched on something that Mark and I have been working for a long time, and that's galleries. Furry art has been around long enough now, as in identified furry art, not just stuff that happens to be anthropomorphic, but has identified, hey, this is furry art, has been around long enough that it is known to be an economic force. But yet there has been, it has been snail's pace trying to get contact with galleries. As you pointed out, it's a very small part of the furry art scene. Why? What is it about, since it's a known commodity, what is the resistance, do you think?
That's a great question, and I have another PowerPoint exactly on that topic. So one of them is a structural concern. So the relationship to gallery representation is really embedded in the art school, the BFA and the MFA environment. And so because furry artists in general have a really tight network, high network density amongst other furry artists, low network density, or what we call network holes, which are really important for distributed networks of people to connect, don't often include the curators and galleries that someone would need to get fine art representation. So that's the structural component of it. And that's the kind of thing that I think will be overcome by people with connections to the fine art world, making those networking connections to other people. So folks looking for gallery representation, I spent more than 10 years working in the fine arts world, and I would be more than happy to introduce you to curators, artists, and gallerists, and help develop your portfolios if you are looking for representation. Please message me. The second is that because we don't have sites of consecration, right? These curators, these folks who are tastemakers, right? Who can stand as authorities in the art market. It's very hard to teach galleries who they should be collecting, or who they should be pushing to collectors. I don't think that fine art collectors are inherently opposed to collecting furry art. That was a theory that I had for a while. I'm a big fan of Patricia Taxon's definition for like how to identify furry media and furry art. And my previous theory was that furry art was both incredibly earnest, right, representative of the individual, oftentimes explicitly sexual, and then contextualized within mass media art, and that those three things were off-putting to collectors. And I was given enough counterexamples for that not being the case that I have now abandoned that theory. And I think it is much more about the fact that the kinds of people who would invest in collecting don't have any context. And so by having curators who create art shows which are intelligible to that group, I'm pointing at one of them right now as I'm talking, organizers, we now have the opportunity to explain what art belongs in a gallery. There is I'm blanking on his name right now, but a video essayist who made a video essay about Ad Astra, and the essay was titled "This Shit Belongs in a Museum." And I agree. Not that furry artists or any artist should be seeking the validation of institutions like that, but they do serve an important role in saving our work and our cultural output. And hopefully with more intelligible systems, we'll be able to get this shit into a museum.
I'm going to ask a question from online, and this is for Junos. So Bear asks, can you make a prediction whether distinct furry labels or categories would help or hinder the furry identity conferred to the furry music?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned that labeling music as furry through it being created by furries, by the fandom, can be a tool to control the spread to the mainstream, let's say, to preserve some idea of authenticity. But I also ask, who is using these labels? Like, if Amazon starts tagging music discs as furry, I'm personally not a fan of the idea of Amazon deciding what is furry. But if Fur Affinity makes a furry tag for their music, for, let's say, music that is about furries, about fandom, depending on the user's reactions, that's just the fandom labeling itself. You know, it's just the community being itself. That's kind of why I my presentation split between furry ownership of the terms and just general authority to label anything as furry.
Awesome. Is there any other questions for the other two speakers? Maybe the gentleman in the back? No, just you. Yep. Please come up.
Hi, João. Muito obrigado. I had another question for you. How do you see furry music as a way to bridge, to bring mainstream listeners into anthropomorphics or to represent specific furry communities? If you have say a music group that is making music that is overtly anthropomorphic in theme and in art and accompanying artwork and in lyrics, how do you see that as a potential for bringing in listeners who are not familiar with the furry fandom or anthropomorphics at large? Thank you.
A lot of furry music has like Ian said last year, the for us, by us, for us thought of it. So, but at the same time, furry musicians are people who live in the world, and so they can benefit from more listeners. It is tough to predict this, but yeah, furry music can make people realize some affinity to furry ideals. It is fairly conceivable that there would be an approximation to furry music with queer themes that is sort of bridges the jump between a queer person if they want to be a furry or if they know about furries. But yeah, tough. Don't know how to answer. Thank you for the question.
Are there any other questions for either Eduardo or Vanguard, who's also online?
have a question for Ian, if that's okay.
Sure. I mean,
are they part of the same panel? I really liked your presentation. I am very curious what you mean about the bubble or your predictions for that bubble. I'm also curious about other subspaces in the art community, especially if like NSFW art is more or less resilient to these economic dynamics.
So my general prediction for, thank you for the question, and then I have actually a question for you, Eduardo, if you don't mind. My general predictions for the sort of explosion in capital infusion into the furry marketplace is that it will equalize. We don't have very much data about the amount of time people spend in the furry fandom in terms of the relationship to like capital investment in it, how much they spend. There is some data, but longer longitudinal studies are needed. And given the fact that people tend to spend a long time in the furry community, we should expect that even if the number of people decrease, right, or individuals joining the community, that rate decreases, that as the community ages, higher degrees of disposable income will allow for the market to continue. Your other question was about other counterculture and subcultural arts and whether or not they receive like validation or like consecration. I'll point to you, there's a gallery in Los Angeles called Kordansky. I think they're in New York too. They did a showing of the work of the gay fetish artist Tom of Finland. And they've done 2 shows of Tom of Finland. In fact, they manage his estate. And recently a collection of 5 to 7, I would say like A-, B grade. I'm being kind of cunty about that. Pieces by Tom of Finland just sold, I believe, at Sotheby's for around $125,000. I think that number is right. In the 6 figures, but there is a real hesitance to view furry art within that same context, we have been around as a market and as a creative force long enough that it's surprising to me that there really has only been one major museum show of Nayland Blake's work that is, and please argue with me about whether or not you think Nayland Blake's show, Finding Nomen, is furry. That is inherently furry. Can I ask Eduardo a question? Can I be greedy?
Please.
Thank you. I'm being greedy. I'm really interested in stickers as language, but also stickers as sort of a form of self-expression. Is there anything in your research that has talked about whether or not like the language of stickers, at least the stickers that one makes of themselves or of their own persona, has both like private and public components, mutual intelligibility in the fandom, or like sole intelligibility only to the maker, depictor, and placer, and then the people that they let in on that?
Yeah, definitely. So that is something I thought about a lot because that also ties into like, if the idea of stickers as valuable or like the valorization of stickers, since these are tradable things, so people assign value to them. I'm in like my previous presentation, I mostly looked at this through the amount of identification with persona and like the stickers that depict one's persona. In a lot of my interviews, they will also talk about specific sticker designers or artists as being, they want this one more because it is more recognizable, because it is a more well-known sticker design artist within the community, so that also gives it more value. But on the other hand, there's a point where some of my participants were like, okay, now it's too saturated. I don't want that artist anymore because it's too generic in a sense. And so that kind of dynamic between distinction and like mutual interpretability is definitely part of how stickers as commodities, as gifts, receive value.
Optimal distinctiveness in stickers has got to be absolutely fascinating. Do you have an archive of the different stickers that you've taken pictures of, where you might be able to like show what that distinctiveness looks like?
I kind of just have a bunch of pictures that I take at conventions or like that my participants show to me, and it's not really organized.
I mean, the personal, pure archive of the collection for yourself is really beautiful and in line with the idea of like furrying and queering the idea of archives. So, heck yeah.
Well, yeah.
And thank you.
Yes.
Okay, can we give all four presenters a big round of applause? Thank you so much. I just want to share with you a really cool trick. I don't know if you get those like magnets from like plumbers and your local electricians. They want to get your like business, but you don't need 3 electricians in 2 months. You can put those magnets in cold sink water, and overnight they will peel, and they will keep the magnetism. Then you can put your stickers on them, and you can cut it, and now you have magnets that are furry on your fridge. Anyway, so
that's the most important thing you'll learn today.
My partner and I have caught like 100 of them. Anyway, we have lunch in the back. I can smell them. They are delicious. So I won't stop you. Lunch break is 1 hour, so we will be back in 1 hour. And the next panel will be a virtual artist discussion. So please be here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.